attendees what you think the most important things are that they should leave today with and bring back to their specific practice from your presentations. And we'll go in the order in which you presented. Ryan Wagner, you're up first.
Thank you very much, David. I'll keep my comments brief here. I think what I would want to highlight is that for those that are not working in the industry, as the panelists are, there is often times a very negative connotation associated with bankruptcy, whereas in reality, bankruptcy can be quite a useful tool for companies that need to restructure. As I mentioned in my presentation, Section 363 of the Bankruptcy Code allows a company to sell its assets in bankruptcy free and clear of liens, and that is a very, very attractive option for potential purchasers. So, I would just reiterate that bankruptcy, while it could mean the liquidation of a company, oftentimes it's quite the opposite. It's a way of preserving jobs, preserving a particular company, or finding a strategic purchaser that enables the company to continue and be viable. And thanks again, everybody, for joining today.
Thank you, Ryan Wagner. Mark Podgany.
Well, I think one of the key takeaways is that the distress that we've seen in the oil and gas, retail, and healthcare sectors over the last year or two is likely to continue into 2018. But within those industries, there are probably specific sectors and subsectors that are likely to experience more distress than others. And one needs to keep that in mind if when looking at whether to service companies in those sectors or invest in those sectors, or if you're working in that sector, that those are very specific issues that are out there. And I think in conjunction with that, in terms of understanding how to combat the distress, whether it's in bankruptcy or not, you really have to understand some of the specific legal issues and the tools that you can use. Same thing on the financial and operations side. In addition to the three key industry areas, there are probably some other areas that may experience distress in 18 and beyond. We're talking about restaurants, real estate, and there are probably others. But one, or probably several common themes around what we may see in the future are disruption by the internet and technology, very inexpensive debt, large amounts of leverage, big debt loads that allow no margin for error, high wage costs. So I think those are some common themes that arise out of what's going on today and what may happen in the future. And finally, the retail and healthcare industries are undergoing long-term restructuring processes. So we're likely to see distress and bankruptcy in those industries for years to come, and they are not going away. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark Podgany. David Berliner.
Thanks, David. I think the summary of my key takeaways, I really have two issues. One is due to the current ultra-competitive lending environment, as we discussed on these covenant-like loans, and because there's so much capital chasing deals, lenders are being pushed into providing these covenant-like loans by the borrowers. These loans are loans that lack the protective covenants or restrictions on the debt service capabilities of the borrower, and as such, these loans give the lenders little negotiating strength to protect their capital, and they have much greater risk than traditional leverage loans. I think these loans are going to continue to proliferate as long as interest rates remain low and the investors have appetite for these risky loans. As I said, there's a lot of debt coming due in the next few years, and when the day of reckoning eventually comes, it's likely to be painful for both the lenders and unsecured creditors. On the retail side, we talked about the Chapter 22 bankruptcy filings coming from the reorganization. As Mark just discussed, there's likely to be a lot more retail bankruptcies over the next couple of years. And if the retailers are not careful and they just rush to get out of bankruptcy, then we're likely to see more of these Chapter 22s with retailers if they don't address the various operational problems and they just focus on their balance sheet, debt for equity swaps or things like that. And one reason, as we discussed for this, is they have such little time to really evaluate their store leases, which stores they want to keep open and which they're going to close, and that's a significant problem. And in addition to the short lease renewal timeline, the retailers typically face a lot of pressure from their secured lenders, to push towards a liquidation of their inventory before that 200-day maximum limit. And the other reason, that I think it's going to be tough for a lot of Chapter 11 retailers is if they're struggling and, to avoid bankruptcy and things are tough right now, they don't have the money to spend to really fix their operations, to, deal with the lack of e-commerce and other internet-based solutions that their stronger competitors have. And I think that's going to be another issue that's going to force a lot of these retailers into trouble in the future. I'll turn it back to you, David.
Our thanks to David Berliner. And finally, David McKnight.
Yeah, I think the key takeaway from my presentation is that for anybody who's working with distressed companies, in the period prior to filing for bankruptcy, you need to be aware that any transactions that are engaged with between related parties could potentially be challenged in a bankruptcy. Because of that, it's important that if a company is thinking about doing a financial transaction that has any appearance of impropriety, they should make sure to do all the best practices to make sure that the valid business reasons for that transaction are well documented, that all their projections are well documented, that the benefit of that transaction for the existing creditors is well documented. But I think all of these things can be very valuable if you do get to the point where you are in a bankruptcy, that those liabilities don't end up going back and affecting the current sponsors and equity owners.